Hello and welcome to Stronger Voices Together, brought to you by John Lyons Charity, a podcast dedicated to exploring the diverse, vibrant world of disability and inclusion. The charity's funding strives to support all children and young people through education, including those with learning and access needs, championing their right to access the same opportunities as anyone else. I'm your host, Lucy Edwards, blind broadcaster, content creator and disability activist, and I'm delighted to be on this journey with you. For those of you listening to this podcast and not watching, I'm joined by my gorgeous guide dog, Miss Molly, at my feet. My audio description is that I've got a forest green dress on. It's velour in feel and touch, and I'm wearing a nude lipstick and coral eyeshadow. Hello, and thanks so much for tuning in to our podcast, where inclusivity is at the heart of every conversation. In today's episode, we will be exploring inclusive practice, what this really means, and how we can do more together to provide opportunities for all children and young people. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Cheryl Cato, Artistic Director at Action Space, and Luke Holloway-Williams, Artistic Director at the Primary Shakespeare Company. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Hello. So I always love to start these podcasts, if you guys don't mind, with an audio description of what you both look like, and also your pronouns, and a bit more about yourselves. So who's going to take it away first? Cheryl? Yeah.
Yep. Hi. Yep. I'm Cheryl. My pronouns are she, her. I am a over middle-aged Black woman. I have very short, natural gray hair, and I'm wearing a black polo neck jumper and a sort of grayish jacket.
Nice. And Luke?
I'm Luke Holloway-Williams. I'm also over middle age. I don't have much hair to speak of. What there is white, but I'm wearing a hat today, not because of vanity, but because I'm really cold. And I'm also wearing a sort of charcoal grey polo neck of a sort of jaunty nautical style. I would say it's quite, yeah, exactly. I should be singing a sea shanty in this or something like that. And also,
I love that visual. Nice. And what do you both do? So do you want to take it away, Cheryl?
Well, as you said, I'm creative director and CEO of Action Space. Action Space is a London-based charity that supports learning disabled artists. So really our aim is that any young person or child with a learning disability can decide they want to be an artist, a visual artist, and achieve and overachieve.
And Luke?
I am the artistic director of the Primary Shakespeare Company, although the people with whom I work would say I'm only the artistic director because I got to pick job title first. But I did sort of start it off. And I split my time between doing that and teaching in a primary school half of the week. And Primary Shakespeare Company is a charity that started off with a mission to help raise attainment and achievement for all children through an engagement with drama generally and Shakespeare in particular. And just to give a little bit of background, we started off, a lot of our work for a long time was in non-SEN settings, and in about sort of 6 or 7 years ago, we started to deepen our practice through, and I really believe that is what happened. I think that our practice has become deeper and more challenging artistically and more fulfilling and richer through our engagement with SEN schools.
So a question for both of you then. What does inclusive practice mean to you? What does it look like?
Well, inclusive practice to me is just taking away barriers. It's very bespoke. Our work is very artist-centered. So we work with about 70 artists on a weekly basis, and they come to us for studio sessions. The barriers they face are different. So it's not about having a tick box. It's about focusing on each one individually, saying, what do they need? What are the barriers are they facing? How do we make what they want to happen possible? So that's inclusion to me. And we were talking about earlier, in a lot of ways, it's really best practice because everyone should have, that approach. But definitely for us, it's bespoke and it's individual.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that, Luke? It's bespoke and individual?
I would say that's absolutely true. And it's about, I think, for us, what inclusivity looks like to me is that every single person in that room is equally engaged, that we have devised, a way of making that workshop work where everybody, or to spin it, put it on its head, if anybody is, say, sitting in the corner with their one-to-one and somebody has given them something else to do, we failed. That is not an inclusive session. Having said that, when you go, a first session is very often about looking at who those people are. You don't necessarily, and being, as you're saying, bespoke. So, but it's, it's the hard work that you then need to do to go, right, okay, what are they, what can I see? What are they offering,
And inclusion, you've defined it very well there in that setting, but what would you say is the difference between inclusion and accessibility, though?
Accessibility for me is sort of a tool towards inclusion.
Right.
It's what are the things, what are the tools, what are the strategies that need to be in place so that people can be included. I was going to say another thing to that too, though. I think it's also important for people to be able to choose to not engage and not be included. We've got a lot of artists who will come into the studio and they're just having a day where they just don't feel like it. And I think it's also really important that they're able to say, I just don't feel like it today.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is it's really important that people can be their authentic selves within a session. I mean, for us, it's, the journey that we've been on as a charity, I think is very interesting. We started off, as I said, we started off in non-SEN sessions. Cheryl and I were talking about this beforehand. It's very difficult to get away from the word mainstream primary schools. For me, that's quite problematic. But, for want of a better word, using that working in mainstream primary schools. And a lot of the settings in which there was we felt that a lot of the pupils whom we encountered, who we were trying to teach or help learn, were excluded for a number of reasons. Now, they were excluded, a lot of them, because of language barriers, because we were working with cohorts at that time, a lot of children who were refugees or for whom English was a second language, there was sort of cultural impoverishment, a lot of children from very deprived backgrounds. And we started off, they weren't not accessing the curriculum as it were. So we were starting to look, well, how can we make, for a lot of these children who can't speak this language, what can we do to make this accessible? So our sort of ethos came from looking at children who weren't included, who weren't gaining access to the curriculum. And then as we started to move into working with into SEN schools, that was the same principle, but we really felt that we had to find an additional approach. And what that has become is looking at the person in that room who has the most need and starting with them. So for us, we're trying to create a session which includes everybody, but our work has to begin with the person who has the most access needs and putting in place things that they need in order to access them. We think that this work, I've sometimes been quite irritated by people saying, oh, so you're simplifying what you're doing. And I think this could not be more wrong. It's actual opposite of what we're doing. There's some very, very hard, critical thinking that we do to say, right, what is the absolute kernel of this play? What's the central issue of this play? What does it turn on? Because if we can find that, and we can find a physical representation for that, that's something that everybody can access. So, so for instance, when we worked on Macbeth a couple of years ago, after a lot of workshopping, a lot of work and a lot of thought, we decided that the crown, just the physical object of the crown, and what happens when you place a crown on somebody's head. What does that do to that person? Or how does everybody look at that person? Do they look at them differently when they are suddenly wearing a crown? Does it change? And it does. You put a crown on somebody and suddenly the person in that room, you look at the person in that room in a completely different way. And if you take the crown away, then what happens? If you offer them a crown, do they choose to take it? All these things. And these transactions started to inform the direction that the work was going to go. But everybody, and that actual work not only informed what the work that we were doing with children with a variety of needs, but also started to bleed into our mainstream, or our non-SEN setting work as well, because I felt that the work that we had done, we'd found the most powerful point of the play. So, as what we were saying earlier, we don't think that this is good SEN practice. We just think this is good artistic practice.
Well, I was going to say, because we work differently.
Okay.
We're not teaching and we're not in an educational setting. We're facilitating. So we're starting, we have small groups. In general, we like to work with 6 to 8 people at a time in a studio, in a professional studio setting. Mm-hmm. And we're about starting with the individual, starting where they are. So if someone comes to us new and joins a studio project, we'll literally have out everything, all the materials, anything. And they start where they start, and they work on a one-to-one basis with a facilitator who sort of does a lot of observations, looks at what they're interested in, starts introducing materials, and sort of develops their practice organically. We have people who have processes that they have to go through. We had one person that we worked with who, when he came into the studio, he needed to pour out 32 pots with paint before he could start painting. So, and everywhere else he went, they would try to rush him through that, or they would say, we don't have enough materials, you can't do that. He wasn't doing any work. He was miserable. He came to us, we let him do it. And we then realized that if he could do those 32 pots that he had poured out, we could then put them away somewhere. He was then at the next stage in his practice, and he could start painting. Now that came through observation. It also came through talking to support workers. It came to talking to teachers he had worked with. It came through talking to all sorts of people. In general, people say to us, don't let him pour out 42 pots of paint. And then we go, let's pour out 42 pots of paint and see what happens. But yeah, that wraparound is really important. We constantly are evaluating and monitoring. That's 360. So we'll send home, because we're really interested also in looking at the outcomes outside of the studio. So one of the things with a lot of the people that we're working with, they're spending their whole life being given a box and told what to do. When they come to our studio, this is their spot, this is their time, do whatever you want to do. And often the whole process of deciding what they want to do, so analyzing options, deciding what they want to do, then they get more confident. So we'll get feedback from families saying, oh, well, now when he comes home, he'll be really sort of quite determined about what he wants for dinner and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, it spills outside of the studio.
Yeah, so Cheryl, is that why a specialist organisation like Action Space needs to exist, because of those processes? Do you need to educate?
When I first came to Action Space, I remember saying, my goal would be in 20 years that there doesn't need to be an Action Space because all of these artists could be just out doing whatever. Now I'm turning it around and saying my goal is that organizations, mainstream organizations, understand that there needs to be the involvement of these supported studios and organizations like us, because we bring in expertise that we can share with them, but also it's that relationship.
So if that's your goal then, and people are listening to this podcast, what would you say to them? How easy was it to make an inclusive environment for your people that come to your classes? Because people are scared to do the basics, and again, I've said it a lot in these podcasts. I knew nothing about disability until I became disabled myself, so sometimes it's not people's fault. But now what do they have to do?
We make mistakes all the time, like on a daily basis. Even though people, you make a mistake, and when you make a mistake, you say, "I'm really sorry, I've made a mistake," but you learn and you move on. And that is really important. We work with a lot of big cultural organizations, and often they will say, well, we've really wanted to do more inclusive work, but we're afraid. If you don't fight that fear and you don't take that step, then nothing's going to change.
I agree. And Luke, would you also say that how easy was it to adapt your programs to be inclusive? And what are the core things that make an opportunity inclusive for anyone listening who's never done it before?
Well, I first of all wanted to pick up on what Cheryl said, because something lifted in my heart when you said, talked about making mistakes and sort of feeling that, that fear of making a mistake. So one of the things that we look for in our practitioners is somebody who that's where they want to be. That's where they want to be. So for us, how easy is it? I think desire has a lot to do with it. I think if you want to do it, I don't think it's not difficult. You require stamina. You require openness. As I was saying, in common, I would think that it's the desire of the practitioner, the person. They don't want to be anywhere else. Because the rewards for you as an individual are huge. You go on a process of rich discovery. Like I'm saying, I feel that the people that I want to work with, what they're doing in that is an artistic endeavour, just like any other artistic endeavour. And what you need to do is you need to see what's there. You are making something with the people who are in that room. What you're looking for is their unique characteristics.
And you need to have an interest in people and an openness to learn both ways. I mean, all of our facilitators start with us as volunteers, and you can usually see within about 3 seconds if they walk into the studio if it's going to work or not, because the volunteer will walk in and right away it'll be like, oh, that's really interesting what they're doing. Flexibility is really also, don't come in with a set, this is what we're going to do. You've got to constantly be, as you said, reading the room. What can I change? You have to be willing to be flexible. So and the desire is really important. Cost, I'm going to say that there is a cost, because obviously if you're working with one of our artists, you've got the artist, but you've got their facilitator and you've got the organization. Someone said to me the other day, your budget is a reflection of your ethics. If you want to do this work and it's hugely rewarding and it's great and it's what should be done, then you have to invest in it. And what doesn't work is if you're doing it as a tick box exercise. If you just say, well, I need to be working with disabled people, so I'm going to get these people in, that doesn't work. And our artists can tell. They really can tell.
I think you can. And you're chatting about cost. If we're talking about working with other organisations, how do you work with them to encourage them to be more inclusive?
By stealth. Not really. Do you know, actually, I can say, and it's been a really, I don't know, since COVID, I feel the world has opened up. I think everyone went away and thought. I think everyone got the idea of what it's like to be isolated and not be included in things. And it feels to me like there's been a big shift. I mean, yes, of course, there will always be people in organizations that haven't done the shift. But for me, I've been really encouraged in the last few years. And Also, what I'm getting a lot less is people who are saying, oh, well, we already know what we're doing. There's a lot more of, well, we can learn from you and you can learn from us, which is really good.
I think that's true. I think we had to do so much stuff differently. You know, so much was thrown up in the air, and I think we, certainly as an organisation, were determined to have a response and a presence and want to do things. And yeah, it led to a lot of very good conversations. I love that. What did you say? Your budget is a reflection.
It's a reflection of your ethics, yes.
And that's brilliant. Yeah. And it does. I would say that I would love more people to know about how fantastic this work is, because I would love to have more people. I'd love to have, you know, the limits of what you can do. You are limited by the number of practitioners, of really skilled people, and you need really skilled people, and that's limited. And you know, and I think part of that is about showing people how fantastic this work is. You know, so that people, you know, more people want to be in that room.
If someone is listening to this now and they've never come across anything that you do, why should they do it right now? Like, I'm just trying to get out of you. Like, I'd love some action points of like...
It's their right for a start. It's absolutely their right. And I would say the arts are just hugely, you know, the benefits of engaging with the arts are just so manifold. You get to, it's a creative, collaborative, validating experience. You get to, you get to put yourself into it. And sometimes, you know, for a lot of the people that we're working with, they have been made to feel quite invisible. And this is a way of going, hey, I'm here, who I am. This is, you know, your people seeing you. And just you've had parents who've, you know, literally been in tears going, I never expected to see my child on a stage, you know, being that, you know, and that's, if you wanted any additional justification for doing it, it's right there.
I was going to say, what we always have, there's always a wonderful moment with someone who joins our studio, who the first exhibition we have, and their work is on the wall, and their families come in and they run over and show their families. And you know, at that moment, first of all, they've relabeled themselves as an artist, but also families labeled them as an artist too. And it, you know, for people who, with families, it's often about, how do I solve this problem? How do I organize this for them? To suddenly see them in a different brand as an artist is really amazing.
I love that, a different brand.
But also, as you said, you know, being an artist, I mean, when we say develop practice, that can be anything. That could be a personal practice that's just about self-expression. It's about well-being. And going back to what you said about why, well, why not? Everyone else is able to.
Totally. I agree.
And also because our culture would be so much richer if, you know, our culture at the moment is, I wouldn't say it's narrow, but it's narrower than it should be. It really is. And you know, it's a sort of perceptual shift. I think people look and say, oh, this is art over here. And you go, no, I'm sorry, you are profoundly wrong. You know, you have been conditioned to think that that's all art can be, no, or all theatre can be, or all music
It's also another voice at the table, because, you know, we talked about the intersectionality. I mean, there are debates going on about all sorts of things.
Okay, then both. What are the differences between inclusive practice and specialist delivery? And what are the merits of each? Does anyone want to take that one?
Cheryl.
Well, see, I was going to say again, it's, you see, for me, inclusive practice is the big one. That's the one about focusing in on people and taking away the barriers. For me, specialist practice is, again, it's a tool. One of the ways that you have inclusion is that you have these special things that you have to do, something that's specific to a person or specific to a context. So
I was going to say, I think whilst I understand why it sometimes is useful to have this, I think that inclusive practice is more about the principles of what you're applying, and specialist practice is sometimes the stuff that you might need to bring in, that to facilitate that. Sometimes, we were, so for instance, in a recent project, we made the discovery, and, we were able to do this because of money, that using film, some of the pupils with which we were working weren't able to be in front of an audience. It caused that they would get very, very stressed, but their performances were amazing. So we were able to use, having them away from a big crowd, but spending an hour recording their performances, and then, and then making that part of the whole theatrical whole. That kind of specialist approach, in needing those, those extra tools, that extra thought about how we might do that. That's useful. Yeah. You're talking about specialist practice. We use music a lot because that's a real, so for instance, again, going back to Macbeth, we had the song Double, Double, Toil and Trouble. It was, we used, it worked on a lot of different levels. Some people were able to respond to the text in it within the school, but it was, it had a lot of actions that went with it. Other people, we had, some of the text was signed, so we were able to do that. But it was also, there was a sort of chanted response and so on, and the whole, so it gave lots of different, so it gave lots of different points of access. But again, that particular text, the Double, Double, Toil and Trouble, which is the witch's spell, also meant that everybody in that room was getting a sort of taste or a sense of a central part of the play as well. You've got the crown, but you've also got the magic as well. So again, there was that sort of thing. So yeah, specialist practice in terms of things, practitioners with additional skills that they're able to bring.
But so again, it's about taking what you have, trying to think, okay, how am I going to do it? But then really focusing on that person and say, how do I draw that person out? How do I draw their creativity out? That's where the inclusion comes. It's that approach that I am going to make this possible. I mean, this is what I bore everyone with constantly, because they come in and say, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, okay, well, how are we going to make it possible?
Yeah. Cheryl, Luke, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can honestly say it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, guys. Fabulous insights. Stay tuned for part 2 after this testimonial.
Hi, my name is Leonie Jackson. I have dark curly hair, I wear glasses, currently wearing a blue dress. I'm a teacher at Broadfield Primary School. I'm currently based in Year 5. I have a few roles around the schools. The computing lead, the lead of for design and technology, and I'm also the head of Year 5 at the moment. The thing that I love most about the Primary Shakespeare Project is that every single child gets the chance to get involved. So we're a 3-form entry school. There are 3 Year 5 classes. And then we also have children from our ASC provision, so autism specialist unit provision, and they normally come into their mainstream classroom for lessons. So those children also had the opportunity to participate in the project. And it's been great to see through the workshop and the lessons how their confidence have grown. Children in general, I feel like they're quite sensitive, and they see things, they realize more than you think they do. And that feeling of being excluded, it really sits with them. So they see the fact that, oh, there's a certain group of children that always get chosen to do this thing. But when it's everyone, then you take all of that away. And I think as a teacher, especially with our philosophy in our school, we always start with inclusion in mind. Inclusion doesn't cost anything. It's free. As a teacher, the thing that stood out for me the most during the performance day was that you couldn't tell who was who on stage. So their ability didn't matter. It didn't matter if they were EAL. It didn't matter if they had SEND needs, because none of that was shown on stage. And that's down to the hard work of those instructors from Primary Shakespeare, as well as the adults in school that's helped out as well. So it's been a wonderful experience thus far for all our pupils.
That That was such a great testament to inclusive practice. Welcome back to part 2 of this conversation, where we will dive deeper into the nuanced realm of inclusive practice. In this part of our journey, we'll discuss further how organisations can strive towards inclusive practice and find the solutions to ensure inclusion is meaningful. I am now joined by John McNeely, Youth and Community Services Manager at Action on Disability, and Jossie Lightfoot, CEO of London Chamber Orchestra. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me, guys. So I always love to start, if you're okay, with an audio description, your pronouns, and also a bit more about what you do. So Jossie, could you start for us?
Sure. So I'm of average height, non-binary. I have blonde, brownish, very short hair. I wear glasses. I am today wearing a grey jumper. And my pronouns are preferred they, them, but I also accept she, her, as that tends to be what people assume.
Thank you so much.
My name is John McNeely, and I probably look like a pint of Guinness. I've got a black jumper on with a sort of grey top, and I've got a white beard. I kind of look a bit grey and white all over, and I'm wearing glasses, and I'm gesticulating, sorry. I'm the Youth and Community Services Manager at Action on Disability, and we're a West London charity who are a DPO, Disabled People's Organisation. So the work that we do is led by disabled people, including young disabled people.
Lovely. And Jossie, did you tell us a bit more about where you're from and what you do?
I'm the CEO of the London Chamber Orchestra. We run an education programme which is roughly about 50% of what we do, the other 50% being performing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Jossie, you have 2 autistic children, don't you?
I have one autistic child who has also got cerebral palsy. The 2-year-old is just bonkers.
I love it. Oh, what are the obstacles you have found regarding inclusive practice for your children then?
Well, for me, it's been a really interesting journey because prior to having children, I used to work as a musician, doing a fair bit of outreach and education, sometimes with special schools and sometimes just with huge groups of children from all walks of life. So I had quite a bit of experience with a lot of organisations who provide support for a variety of people. But I never really understood too much about what that means for your daily lives. And we've been very generous in giving our kids a very unusual lifestyle. I'm in a non-binary civil partnership. We have 2 children and we carried 1 each. So there's not really very much about their life that fits with societal norms. So from day one, really, we've had lots of experiences, and to be fair, not many of them have been hugely negative, but there's so many aspects of our life where our differences are highlighted. For example, even just filling out forms for the kids, there's a mother box and a father box. And then moving, going through schooling system for my son, starting to understand how cerebral palsy and ASD affect him when he's in environments that don't suit him, getting to know that for ourselves at home, but also helping him to be able to choose what he wants to pursue in life.
Yeah, and are these learnings reflected in the delivery of London Chamber Orchestra, would you say?
Massively. Alongside my personal journey of understanding how inclusion can affect people individually, I bring a lot of that to the practice in the orchestra. But I think most of it is to do with my mindset of decision-making, the process of discussion, who we have discussions with, how many people we involve in decision-making, and the diversity that of their background. So it's really important that we consult with a number of different people in all sorts of walks of life in order to be able to approach our inclusive practice, both internally with our volunteers and with the people that we're delivering our program to, so that we can confidently go in and say, you know, we've done our research, we've done our work, we understand, you know, where we're coming from and what it is that we're hoping to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And for both of you then, when can inclusive practice feel tokenistic, and how can you avoid it feeling so? What would you say?
Well, from my experience, I guess inclusion as a token, or, you know, including young disabled people, can feel tokenistic if there is no communication, if there isn't time offered to listen to young disabled people as to what it is they want to do in whatever setting. Quite often, from my experience, I will spend time with partner organisations or other organisations having these long conversations, and the ideas around including young disabled people in their provision is well-meaning, but quite often when you get to the practical delivery of something, what we will find is that those young disabled people are included in a venue, but segregated. And I think it might feel like to that organisation they are including young disabled people, and it might represent inclusion to them, but in fact they're still practicing segregation. And that needs challenging, and that obviously is, it's not meaningful inclusion, it's not active inclusion, it's tokenism, and that's a challenge. I know that many organisations are well-meaning and they want to be inclusive, but if they're not resourced, have the time, prepare the time to listen to what it is young people want from them, then it does run the risk of being tokenistic.
What are you just saying?
Well, John, your point about the intention of inclusion becoming more about segregation is something that we come across an awful lot in the classical music industry. There's such a difficult scenario at the moment with huge change in the industry, where we are surrounded by the traditions and lots of people passionately trying to keep hold of those traditions, but ultimately those traditions are non-inclusive. They serve a very small number of people, and so the effort, the very well-meaning effort to include people who cannot participate in a traditional performance as an audience member is to put on a concert that's called a relaxed concert, which is effectively for everybody else. And to bring in my experience with my family into my profession, I had about 2 years ago, I had a realization that my eldest child wouldn't actually be welcome in my industry. So there would not be a scenario where he would be able to go and see a concert in a way that he would be allowed to be in that room. And that for me was just a huge bombshell, just the idea that the industry that I've literally dedicated my entire life to is actually not welcoming to a huge number of people, including my own kids. So the realization came from a very well-known festival which introduced a relaxed concert, and out of the whole festival there was one relaxed concert. And effectively what that meant was, if you don't feel welcome in a traditional concert environment, this is the concert for you. Everyone else can go to every other concert. And that massively confounds that segregation of, if we are providing for people's needs, we are separating them and we are creating this them and us environment where we, the us, are looking at them and deciding how to bring them into us. And it's yeah, like you say, John, it is a huge challenge, I think.
And so, John, how do you at Action on Disability support others to provide inclusive opportunities?
We're a sort of reputable disabled people's organisation in West London. So, work for disabled people. They come to us because they trust us. So, and they trust that we will be a voice for them and advocate for their needs and their wants and their aspirations. So organisations will come to us, and it's very much a blank sheet of paper. I guess what we need to find out is, what do other organisations want to achieve? What do they want inclusion to look like? And from there, we can build something. And I think part of that would be training, access to either disability equalities training. Some organisations find it really helpful to have access to knowledge around the social model of disability rather than the medical model. I think that can help encourage inclusion and outreach support. As I said, if we're going to endorse it as a disabled people's organisation, we're putting our reputation on the line.
And to say, so the social model of disability means that the world around us needs to be fixed, and not us as a disabled person. And the medical model kind of says the opposite, doesn't it?
Yeah. So it's not focusing on the impairment, but actually the barriers that are around that exist. There has to be a commitment, and it can't just be, let's run this for 10 weeks and see how it goes. Obviously, pilots are all good and well, but there has to be a long-term commitment, and there has to be ongoing evaluation and feedback opportunities for young people to be heard in that process, so that we can understand its impact and whether it's working.
And are you shocked by some opportunities available that fall short on accessibility or inclusion?
No, I'm not shocked. I'm always pleased when I hear the sort of the desire to be more inclusive, but I guess it's some comments that I've heard today that have struck me. It's like people, I guess, don't really get, through no fault of their own, they don't get disability, I guess, until disability presents itself to their lives. So the world out there, although there's a good intention on most people's part to do the right thing and be inclusive, it doesn't surprise me when you notice there is, they fall quite short. It doesn't surprise me, but I think the intention is there, and I that's a starting place. And there are changes. I think something's happened. Funders have listened, and it seems to me that they have a much more considered approach to the way in which they fund organisations and charities. We've recently been successful in securing 5 years funding from John Lyons, where I think if you're going to succeed, then you need time. And 5 years is a decent amount of time to make sure that something happens. Funders need to give us time. Having more time from funders helps. And I think it's, it seems to me, all funders seem to be adapting the way in which they fund organisations and allowing for more time. So my assumption is, whether it happened over COVID or before, or the greater flexibility, it seems to me that that's working. The way reporting or monitoring or evaluation, the way it's fed back is changing. I think funders are becoming far more creative in the way they access the information or the impact of their funding.
And this is a question for both of you. Why do you think organisations do not consider inclusive practice in their delivery? And how can we help them understand the value of it?
So I think, without sounding pessimistic, I think we are generations away from having a truly inclusive society. So to go into an organization and say, you know, your practices are not inclusive, you're not delivering your product or your service in an inclusive way, is intervening at a stage which is very late on in the process of that. And so if you're going into an organization where the people who at the top of that organization have lived a life where they've not been challenged by any sort of barrier to do with any aspect of their life, it's very difficult to say to them, oh, by the way, these things are really important, because they've been doing just fine. Everything's fine. So to present them with a challenge that they don't perceive to exist in their experience throughout their personal and professional life is just a very difficult concept. Where I think it's a lot to ask of an organisation to all of a sudden prioritise true inclusion. And I think we've got many years, but I think as organisations like ours, to go into schools and to work with schools and to work with partners and to work with, you know, charities like John Lyons who are on the same page and really develop and learn and expand those programs as much as possible, and then, you know, connect with the press, connect with the rest of the world. You can start to make the case that long term, every company will benefit from having an inclusive practice, and the process of trying to make the case that it's profitable or that it's value for money or that it's worth the investment. The more we talk about it, the more we've got case studies of the success, the more we can show that having a diverse workforce, a diverse audience base or customer base, and then a diverse set of schools and organizations that you work with only increases your ability as an organization to adapt well. You get a bigger audience, you get a bigger wealth of experience and knowledge, and that's something that any industry leader in any industry will eventually get on board with, but they need the proof, and I get that. You know, in my position, I need to understand that any money that we're spending is going to the right places and it's going to achieve what we want to achieve. And, you know, with different priorities, that is going to be a different journey for everyone.
Is there often an associated cost when it comes to implementing inclusive practice, or can things be done for free, do you think then?
I think there's a fear that there's a cost. You know, everything costs, I guess, really. And then I guess maybe it's not necessarily about how much will it cost, but it's more about what will we, you know, gain together. You know, there'll be broader partnerships. People, hopefully the world will be a lot more inclusive, and it won't be a question of cost, but you know, that could be generations away. I think I'd go back to the point of whenever the organisations that we work with raise the issue of cost. You know, there is support out there. There is, you know, funding streams that you can access to make sure that resources are in place. But, and I've heard it a couple of times today as well, the biggest cost is, or the biggest expense is getting over that fear. Yeah. You know, the attitude, ignorance, that costs nothing, yeah. You know.
And finally, where can people find out more about starting or working on their inclusive practice?
Well, the organisations that we tap into, if you like, to Inclusion London, they're a good regional organisation who make sure that disabled people's organisations are being disabled people's organisations. There's also the Alliance for Inclusive Education, who are a great support to inclusive education.
Thank you. And Jossie, what about you? Where can we go to find out more?
Well, listening to this podcast is a good start, right? Finish all the episodes. And then I think, you know, there's the way that I experience meeting organisations and getting to know people who work in areas that we need to improve our practices in is literally just getting out there, meeting people, going to events, making sure that we introduce ourselves in a way that shows our values and our ethics and organically over time, we meet more and more people who share those values and ethos with us. And that just grows and grows and grows, and creating this network around you, which gives you that safety net of knowing if you are going to be facing a particular challenge, these are the people that we can chat to. So for me, I mean, we aren't an organisation that necessarily gives advice. We're very much one who goes looking for it. So, and that's how we do it. We just constantly out there meeting people, finding interesting spaces.
I think young disabled people have to have the opportunity to have their voice heard. They have to create the change. They have to take responsibility. It's like saying we're generations away, possibly, but change is happening, and it's our responsibility to make sure that this generation or the next generation have the opportunity to be heard so that they can change the world.
Jossie, John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There is certainly plenty that could and should be done when it comes to implementing inclusive practice. As we conclude our discussion today, it's evident that inclusive practice shouldn't merely be an optional extra. It needs to form an integral cornerstone of what organisations provide. If you're an organisation tuning in, we implore you to pause and reflect on this episode. Consider how your work is delivered and whether it authentically reaches everyone. If you have experience, insights, or opinions on what you've learned during this episode, then please follow John Lyons Charity on Instagram, X, and LinkedIn, and let us know what you think. Remember, together, our collective efforts can make a profound difference.
Hi, my name's Anna Hoddenott and I'm the Senior Grants Manager at John Lyons Charity. I'm a white female and my pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing a bright pink top and black trousers, and I have blonde shoulder-length hair. I would like to thank all of our guests today for their insightful contributions on this episode that focuses on inclusive practice. I would also like to thank Leonie Jackson from Broadfields Primary School in Harrow for her perspective on working with Primary Shakespeare Company. At John Lyons Charity, we are committed to challenging organisations to ensuring that their activities are inclusive and open to all children and young people. We have a responsibility as a funder to challenge organisations on their inclusive practice, regardless of their size or what they do. As John noted earlier, in 2023, John Lyons Charity launched a new strategy which enables us to award funding to organisations over a longer period of time. They can now apply for up to 5 years of funding at a time, which gives them crucial stability and enables them to focus on delivering their vital programmes rather than seeking funding continually. We urge other funders to follow suit. To find out more about our Perspective series and the funding opportunities available, please see our website www.jlc.london.